Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a final year medical student at Cambridge University, and this is the third installment in our monthly series called Monthly Favorites, where each month I talk to you about my favorite books, podcasts, articles, stuff I've discovered that month that I want to share with you guys. We're taking a little break from the recent spate of study and revision themed videos that have appeared on the channel, so yeah, I can promise you that none of these four things that I'm going to be talking about are going to be anything to do with study or revision. Yeah, let's roll the intro. As usual, everything I'm going to talk about is going to be timestamped down below in the description, so if something doesn't quite take your fancy or you want to skip ahead, please feel free to do so. Don't feel like you have to spend all however long this video is, because you probably have better things to be doing with your life, such as work. But we're not going to talk about work today. Instead, we're going to talk about four things. Number one, we're going to talk about the Psy-Changeling series, which is a paranormal romance genre type series of books. Secondly, I want to talk to you about an article that I read recently about like friendship and relationships and kind of my thoughts on that, if you're interested. Thirdly, I want to talk to you about a YouTuber that I recently discovered called Matt Diavella. He is a minimalistic filmmaker, podcaster, and he's got an amazing YouTube channel that has such sick production value videos and has been a real source of inspiration to me for this channel. And finally, we're going to talk about Kendrick's new autobiography called Scrappy Little Nobody, which I read a few weeks ago and actually really enjoyed. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about that. So paranormal romance is apparently a genre. I discovered this like quite recently. I've been reading these books, and obviously I read Twilight back in the day and all of that stuff, but I didn't realize that this was an actual thing. And I realized that I absolutely love the paranormal romance genre of books. I'm a sucker for anything romance related generally, but the nice thing about the paranormal stuff is that you get a lot of like, a lot more in the way of potential conflict and like magic, and I absolutely love the whole magic thing. And the villains are a bit better because it's a little bit more real in a way when you've got like some evil vampire coming after you, rather than in like 50 Shades of Grey where you've got her psycho ex-boyfriend, you know, trying to stab her with a knife. That's like a more like, in a way, unrealistic type of threat that you get. Whereas in paranormal romance, you get very realistic threats like vampires and werewolves and stuff. The really nice thing about the Psy-Changeling series by Nalini Singh is that each book follows a different character, but it's all part of the wider story. So like in the first book, you get introduced to Sasha and Lucas, and in the second book you get like Faith and Vaughn, and it's like each book has like a different character who has their own little love story and gets together with someone else, but like they all combine in a way that each book references the previous ones, and you kind of get glimpses of the characters that you grew to love in the previous books. And like on thinking about it, the thing I absolutely love about this particular series is that because each book is its own little love story, kind of the whole book is almost focused around them getting together. And then when they do get together at the end, that's the end of it, and a new book starts, and then you get to see another love story from the beginning and kind of like the exciting opening stages. Some people, like Alain de Botton, would argue that this obsession that our society has on the opening stages of love stories and films and books means that we're all hyper romanticized, and we all focus too much on the opening stages of a relationship and not enough at all on what happens later, you know, the pain, the arguments, you know, looking after the kids, what type of glass we want to buy from IKEA, or what color the sofa's going to be. All of that stuff gets relegated to, you know, stuff that we don't hear much about, because obviously the only thing we're interested in is the excitement of the initial chase, the initial romance. I kind of agree with him. I think it's sort of bad that society focuses, and like all of this media, all books, all movies focus on the opening stages of a relationship. But to be honest, the opening stages of a relationship are by far the more exciting ones, and I think the fact that all of these books focus on the opening stages of the relationship is what makes them so exciting to read. So yeah, I actually started reading these on my elective in 2017, and read about 10 of them while on elective because I just couldn't put them down because they're just so good. Oh yeah, something I completely forgot to mention, the plot. In a way, kind of irrelevant because the fact that it's a love story is the most important thing. But essentially, in this world, you have three races. You've got the Psy, the PSY, the psychic people, who can like read minds and stuff and have telekinetic powers and stuff. You've got the Changelings, who are like humans that can change into wolves and bears and fish and stuff like that. And you've got the humans, who are just ordinary humans. And this is kind of about the dynamics and the politics of these three different races. So you've got the Psy, who are like the ruling elite, who like all like proper educated and speak very classily and all that stuff, and they sort of subjugate the rest of the races, and they think that changelings are beneath them and that humans are just a bit pointless because they don't have any special powers. And the interesting thing about the Psy is that because all of their minds are connected in this kind of like hive-like structure, it means that in order to stop them from going mad, they've had to erase all emotion, and they've become silent with a capital S. And that means that no Psy is allowed to experience emotion, and they get emotion conditioned out of them at a very young age due to pain and all of this stuff. So when you get particular members of the Psy race who are starting to feel some kind of emotions, then they have to sort of break away from their race. And that's the kind of story of the first two books. It follows some cardinal Psy members, so like people of the race who have like really, really strong powers, and how they start experiencing emotions and how they start falling in love and all of this stuff. But the whole series of 16 books so far is set on this idea of this sort of a war between these three races, and then you get some cooperation because, you know, a Psy mates with a changeling mates with a human falls in love with a Psy, and it creates this really nice meshwork of interweaving relationships and alliances and combat, and it's really good. You should definitely check it out. Secondly, I want to talk about an article that I read on Eric Barker's blog, which is called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. That's the name of the blog. It's a really, really, really good blog. I subscribe to the newsletter, and it's one of the few email newsletters that I get that I actually open and read, because there's just a lot of value in the writing. He writes articles like semi-clickbaity, semi-cliche topics, but the research behind them is really good. So one of them might be, you know, 5 scientifically proven methods to increase your happiness, or 4 scientifically proven ways to become closer to your friends, or, you know, that genre. Initially I thought it was obviously clickbait, but then I started reading his stuff and it's really good. The article that I read most recently is about relationships, and not like sort of romantic relationships, just kind of any sort of relationship. And it poses the idea that relationships are essentially an exchange of bids, where one party makes a bid for attention to the other party, and the other party kind of responds to that bid. It sounds a bit weird, but bear with me, and obviously I'll link the article here and down below so you can read it for yourself. You should, it's really good, and he probably explains it better than I can. Essentially, his idea is that when someone makes a comment to you that, oh look, the weather's nice, yeah, there are 3 ways you can respond to it. You can either accept the bid, you can be like, oh yeah, it's a lovely day, isn't it, blah, 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 you know, comment on that. You can reject it, you can be like, really? I think the weather's a bit shit today. Or you can just kind of ignore it altogether. So you've got these 3 ways of responding to a bid: accept, reject, or ignore. And his theory in this is that the most successful relationships, friendships, marriages, whatever, are where the ratio of number of bids to number of accepted bids is the highest. I think he cites some studies that looked at sort of married couples in like really long successful relationships, and in those there was like quite a high ratio in their general conversation of bids to accepted bids. Like, you know, one would make a comment about the weather, or, oh honey, look, there's a bird outside, and like obviously the other one doesn't really care there's a bird outside, but you know, she responds to it anyway. She's like, oh wow, that's interesting, I wonder if it's a robin, rather than, oh, who cares, or rather than just kind of sitting on her phone. And those sorts of relationships were the most successful. This struck a chord with me because some of the time, especially in relationships with people that I'm very close to, like my mum or my grandma, I find that they often make these seemingly pointless statements, like, you know, I'd be on my laptop doing some work, or, you know, on my phone replying to YouTube comments, and my mum would make some comment about, you know, some shopping she's bought, or like something that was on TV. And previously I sort of used to think that, you know, it was just a comment just made for the sake of it, and I had no need to respond to it because obviously it's my mum, and like, you know, just, you know, I'm busy doing something on my laptop. Like a comment like, oh look, Hugh Grant's on TV, maybe doesn't quite warrant a response from me, because yeah, I can see he's on the TV and I might just grunt. But like having read this and having like seen this idea of relationships being an exchange of bids, I now try my very best to respond to these a bit more, because obviously they're the way conversations happen. And like, I sometimes think that if, you know, we were chilling in my room with my university friends and one of them were to be like, oh look, Hugh Grant's on TV, or Hugh Grant's on YouTube, or like random comment like that, we all would respond to it in like a normal way. And I think sometimes relationships with our parents, and I was talking to a few friends of mine and they kind of agreed, relationships with our parents and people that are very close to us, we sometimes don't necessarily put in the effort that we would with our friends or people that we want to get to know better, because we just kind of assume this, that, oh, you know, obviously I'm just going to grunt at my mum when she says something, because she knows that's just what I do, even though I probably wouldn't do that with my friends. But anyway, roundabout way of saying this article really made me think, if you're in that position where you feel like maybe, you know, your conversations with your parents follow the same formula like a lot of teenagers do, like, you know, how was your day? Yeah, it was all right. You know, that sort of thing, or, you know, what'd you do at school? Work. You know, that's quite common from speaking to my friends. Maybe have a read of this article. It's really interesting. If not, then it might be completely pointless to you. But either way, I find it interesting, and because this series is very specifically aimed at kind of me talking about stuff that I find interesting, I'm trying not to overly worry about, you know, maybe like whether other people will find it interesting. So I'm kind of hoping that you do. I'm kind of hoping you read this article, you find it interesting enough. But if not, then I'm personally trying to be like, you know what, it doesn't matter, at least I've shared it, and you know, at least it's out there. And that's kind of how this creation thing works. But yeah, that's Eric Barker's article about relationships, and I'd highly recommend you check out his blog and subscribe to his newsletter, because it's like genuinely really good content pretty much every week. The third thing I want to talk to you about is a YouTuber called Matt D'Avella. He is a filmmaker, best known for the documentary that was on Netflix called Minimalism. I haven't actually seen it. I'm going to watch it at some point after exams. I'm kind of saving it up as my end of exams treat. But he's recently started a YouTube channel where he has a podcast where he interviews people, like creative people like YouTubers and artists and musicians and stuff, and he talks to them about how they got started, and it's called the Ground Up Show. So the idea is, you know, how you got started, how you grew your thing, and how you made it big. But the reason that I find Matt very, very inspirational is because he started with zero. He started with 0 subscribers on YouTube. And that's something that is a big kind of barrier to entry for a lot of people, and certainly was for me, because I was thinking that, oh, you know, obviously the best time to get involved in YouTube was in like 2010, back when there was not much people around. Obviously it's oversaturated nowadays. This guy, Matt, he felt the same things, apparently, he says in one of his videos. But he decided that actually the way he can set himself apart from the crowd, it's just by being really consistent with his uploads and just producing high quality content. But secondly, by producing it very, very well. Like, this guy's a filmmaker, he's got fancy cameras, he's done this for years and years, he knows how the cameras work. And the quality of his videos, like the production value is so high. Like, it's a point where, like, pretty much everyone has a podcast, but he videos all his podcasts from like 3 different camera angles, and they're absolutely beautiful, like, and posts all these like hour-and-a-half long podcasts on YouTube along with on his actual podcast. So you've got the option of listening to it in the car or in the gym or whatever, but you also have the option of watching it on YouTube. And I think the fact that he's done video with this and done it so well, it just makes it an absolute pleasure to watch. I realized that that's kind of what I would like to go with this channel, like filming in such high quality, hopefully. You know, obviously it's not necessary. All you really need for YouTube is a decent microphone, and you can film anything with even an iPhone. But I think, you know, taking the time and effort into, you know, getting a lighting setup, setting up the microphone, setting up a camera with a decent lens, it's, you know, making sure I remove the Game of Thrones poster from the background, making sure all that stuff in the background is sort of clean because I have to move a lot of stuff. All of this stuff goes into hopefully making a high production value for these videos. And one thing that I really appreciated about his channel was the high production value, and that kind of really inspired me that, yeah, wow, this guy's got such high production value. I can learn a few things from him. He's got really good content as well, and he just followed this formula of good production value plus good content plus consistency. And, you know, in the last 2 months, his channel has exploded in popularity, and it seems to have been an overnight success. But obviously, as he says in one of his podcasts, none of these things are an overnight success. Obviously, he's been working as a filmmaker for the last like 10 plus years, building up all this experience. So now that he's gotten into YouTube and put in the work, put in the hustle, consistently done it, now he's getting results. But yeah, I just find his channel generally very inspirational. It's all about building stuff from the ground up. So if you're into this sort of thing, maybe not necessarily YouTube, just any kind of creative sphere, maybe you're like a painter on the side, or like an artist, or you draw stuff, or you write poetry, and you want to kind of get it out into the world probably then, and you're not really sure, you know, how to do it, then his channel is a source of a lot of inspiration. The podcasts are really interesting. I started listening to them in the car, and yeah, would highly recommend that. If you want to check it out, I'll link his channel down in the description below along with this podcast. And finally, I want to briefly talk to you about Anna Kendrick's latest autobiography. I say latest, I think it's her only autobiography. It probably is. She's like, you know, in her late 20s. Early 20s, late 20s, I don't know. Anna Kendrick, the actress who plays, I don't even know what her name is, in Pitch Perfect, and who did the that Cups song that went big a few years ago. Many years ago now, actually. So she's written a book, and in this book she talks about kind of her childhood, and she talks about moving to LA and becoming an actress and like auditioning for lots of things, and eventually she kind of makes it big with Pitch Perfect, and then she becomes kind of a celebrity. And she talks about the challenges of being in the acting sphere, the whole thing of having to go to hundreds of auditions and kind of starting off really small and then kind of working your way up, and then, you know, eventually if you're really lucky you make your big break. She also talks about the struggles of being a woman in the sphere, which I find really eye-opening. One of the things she says is she makes the point that, you know, everyone says she's very nice. You know, if she gets a fan coming up to her, then, you know, smiles, you know, has a brief chat, takes a photo. The fan goes away thinking, "Oh wow, you're just so nice." And she was saying that this is like a common thing for celebrities to get. Like, the more big they are, like especially big movie stars, the smaller the interaction. Like, even if you have an absolutely tiny interaction with them, like if I met Brad Pitt on the streets, I'd be like, hi, you're Brad Pitt. You'd be like, yeah. Can I get a photo with you? Yeah, of course, no problem. He puts his arm around me. I'd walk away from that thinking, wow, Brad Pitt is such a nice guy. Even though obviously I have no idea he's such a nice guy. It was just like, we just had this like 5-second long interaction. But Anna Kendrick makes the point that especially for women, this whole thing of being nice, it's obviously she says, it's nice for people to say that she's nice. But B, she says that obviously they don't have anything to base that on other than this minor interaction. And C, this label of nice, any kind of situation where you're having to assert yourself in order to fight for your rights or anything like that, then you start to lose this label of nice. And for women, she says, she argues in the book, the opposite of nice is bitch. And therefore, like, as soon as you become not nice, you fall into this realm of, she's difficult, she's a bit of a bitch, and that sort of thing. She also makes the point that in her kind of whole acting career, 90% of kind of difficult people, or people who have created fuss and created kind of all these requirements for them and everything, 90% of them have been men. But 90% of people who have had the label difficult applied to them have been women. So she makes the point that being a man in these situations is a lot. You can definitely get away with a lot more as a man in these situations without it reflecting kind of poorly on your own personality, your own kind of self. Whereas if you're a woman and you kind of have the audacity to, float the boat a little bit, you become labeled as this, as a bitch or as difficult. And men tend not to get labeled as such. If a man is assertive, he's called assertive. If a woman is assertive, she's called difficult or pain in the bum or, whatever word you want. So that was something interesting. It was interesting about the struggles of being a woman in this field. And obviously it's something that me as a guy, I don't really have much exposure to. Something real talk from women talking about what it's like to be a woman. I can talk to my friends about it, of course, but it's different hearing it from someone who is a celebrity and who's in a field that we all seem to covet a lot. Like everyone wants to, be famous, be a celebrity. Like a lot of people's dreams is to be an actor. A lot of people's dreams is to be a big YouTuber, myself included. But yeah, getting the perspective from a woman in this was really interesting. And finally, she gives a really good insight into celebrity culture in a way, and what it's like on the inside being a celebrity. I think we all idolize celebrity a lot. There have been surveys where you ask kids what they want to be and they reply with, I want to be famous. I just thought it was very eye-opening hearing about the kind of behind the scenes of what happened at the Oscars and how she struggled to get into a dress and in her shoes, and she couldn't walk all night, and then as soon as she got home she just like kind of collapsed on the bed and took her makeup off, and she was like, oh my god. And talking about how like with celebrity culture and with things like the Oscar, the Golden Globes and stuff, obviously what the media portrays, what we see on TV is very different. It's a very kind of wrapped up, packaged, airbrushed version of reality. And kind of what you get behind the scenes is a lot more struggle, a lot more pain, a lot more drama. And it's interesting getting that perspective, because with the exception of Darren Brown's book, Happy, where he talks about what it's like being a celebrity, really good book, by the way, I'll talk about it in another video, because I absolutely love that book. With the exception of that, I haven't really heard much about, celebrities talking about what it's like to be a celebrity. And I think it's an interesting thing. Jack Gleeson, who played Joffrey in Game of Thrones, he gave a talk at the Oxford Union a few years ago in which he read out an essay that he wrote about what it's like to be famous, and he gave a really kind of damning indictment of it. It's saying that being famous is not all it's cracked up to be. But I think reading the book, it was just like quite funny, very well written, very easy to follow. B, it had all these interesting insights about what it's like to be a woman and what it's like to be an actress, what it's like to be a celebrity. And I found it broadened my perspective. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it. I came across it in like one of the airport shops, and I was like, oh, Anna Kendrick's autobiography, just maybe kind of cool. But then I decided, you know what, I'm going to give it a chance. I read some review on the internet that said that actually this is a pretty legit read. So I thought I'd read it, and I'm really glad I did, because it's broadened my perspective on life generally. And yeah, if you've got some spare time and, wouldn't mind, quite an easy read. It took me a few hours on the plane to finish it. Yeah, would highly recommend Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. I've talked for a long time. We've talked about, number one, the Psy-Changeling paranormal romance series of books that I absolutely love, that I would highly recommend you check out, even if you're not into that sort of thing. Number two, we talked about Eric Barker's blog, Barking Up the Wrong Tree, and his recent article about relationships and how it's kind of like an exchange of bids between parties. And that's sort of changed the way that I view relationships with my parents and other people that are really close to me. Thirdly, we talked about Matt Diavella, who's a YouTuber that's inspired me a lot with his like high production value, really good content, really good quality, that's stuff. And finally, we talked about Anna Kendrick's autobiography, Scrappy Little Nobody, which I'll be linking down in the description below that you can check out for yourself if you like. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. These monthly favorite videos are always a bit weird because I'm always like, oh, you know, what if no one cares that I read this book and I'm going to talk about it, and I don't know. But then people say that, you know, you shouldn't care what other people think, and you know, there's definitely a lot to be said for that. So yeah, either way, I really hope you did enjoy it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. More vlogs, more revision stuff, more music stuff coming soon at some point. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Good night.